When the doctor told her she was dying, my mother smiled. When I found out, I didn't. There's something cruel about fluorescent hospital light, how it flattens everything into honesty. There's no place for pretense when the air smells like bleach and endings. My mother, Evelyn Parker, sat with her hands folded neatly on her lap, like a woman waiting for a dinner reservation, not her prognosis. I remember thinking, she looks so calm, as if she'd been expecting death to find her all along. The doctor's words slid across the room like cold rain. Stage 4. That was it. Just 2 words, then silence. I wanted to scream, but my mother reached for my hand first. Her fingers, warm, steady, silenced everything inside me. "It's all right, Claire," she whispered. "Don't make this heavier than it has to be." Heavier. That word stayed with me. Outside, the afternoon was too bright, too alive. I drove her home, pretending not to notice how slow her breathing had become. The city moved on, as if nothing had changed. But something had. Something irreversible. That night I stood by her bedroom door, watching her sleep beneath the soft yellow glow of her bedside lamp. For the first time, she looked smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, just finite. The woman who once seemed made of marble and sunlight now looked human. I didn't know whether to pray or to prepare. The next morning, she brewed tea like always, jasmine, 2 spoons of honey, and told me she didn't want anyone else to know. Not my brother, not her friends. "Especially Daniel," she said, eyes sharp but kind. I nodded. I always nodded. It was easy to obey her. She was the kind of woman who made obedience feel like love. For weeks, I played along. I smiled at her jokes, drove her to appointments, organized her pills, and told everyone she was doing great. I built a wall of optimism so high that even I began to believe it. But every night, when the house went silent, I'd stand in front of the mirror and ask myself a single question. Why does she trust me with this secret? The answer came slowly, not from my heart, but from somewhere darker. Because I was the one who stayed. When Dad died, Daniel ran. He called it career focus, but I called it cowardice. He moved 3 states away, came back for holidays with expensive wine and cheap apologies. He'd show up, make a toast to family, and leave before dessert. Meanwhile, I stayed. I managed everything. The bills, the garden, the loneliness. I told myself I wasn't bitter, just realistic. But realism hardens into resentment when you feed it too long. When I found the draft of her will in her study drawer, I wasn't looking for it. I was dusting, organizing her old files, the kind of chores that make you feel useful when your heart is falling apart. The folder was labeled simply Estate. I opened it because I could, because I had a right to. Half of everything, the house, the vineyard, the savings, was going to Daniel, the other half to me. Equal, as if effort and absence weighed the same. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. The letters of my brother's name looked foreign, undeserved. He hadn't earned this. He hadn't earned her. That night, I sat by my window watching the wind bend the trees in the yard. My reflection stared back at me, pale, sleepless, trembling. I whispered to it, if she never tells him she's dying, maybe he'll stay away. Maybe she'll have time to change her mind. The thought was small at first, like a spark underwater. Then it began to breathe. The next morning I deleted his email. He had written, "How's Mom?" I replied with silence. It was easier than I expected. The lying, the small omissions, the gentle redirections. When her friend Martha called asking about the next doctor visit, I said, "Routine checkup. Nothing serious." When the nurse asked if I wanted to update Daniel on the new medication, I smiled and said, "He's too busy. Let me handle it." Each lie felt like a stitch in a dress I didn't want to wear, but couldn't stop sewing. Mother still cooked when she could. Her meals grew smaller, lighter. Soups, stews, soft bread. She would hum while slicing fruit, pretending not to notice how her hands shook. I admired her strength even as I resented her for it. She made dying look graceful. I was still learning how to live. There were moments when she'd catch me staring. "You're thinking too loudly, Claire," she'd tease. I'd smile. "You always say that." "Because it's true," she'd answer, and then look away, as if afraid of what she might hear if she looked too long. Weeks slipped into months. The house grew quieter, like it was learning to mourn in advance. One evening, she asked me to drive her to the vineyard, the one Dad had built before the recession swallowed him whole. It had been abandoned for years, but she said she wanted to see the sunset out there one last time. We sat on the old bench overlooking the hills. The vines were dry and twisted, but when the light hit them, they looked alive again. "This land used to sing," she said softly. "Your father used to say the grapes listened to our arguments." I laughed through the ache. "Then they must have been deaf by the end." She smiled. "Small, fragile, perfect. You have his wit," she said, "but not his bitterness. Don't let it find you." I didn't answer, because bitterness had already found me. It just wore better clothes. When we got home, she went to bed early. I stayed awake, reading through old letters, tax papers, donation receipts. That's when I saw the lawyer's note. "Scheduled meeting, next week. Estate adjustments." My pulse stuttered. She was going to change it. Maybe not the division. Maybe something worse, some charitable trust that would erase everything I'd sacrificed. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought of Daniel getting what he didn't deserve burned behind my eyelids like a fever. The next morning, I called the lawyer's office, pretending to be her assistant. "Mrs. Parker isn't feeling well," I said. "She'll reschedule." The secretary confirmed politely. I thanked her and hung up. It was that easy. I told myself I was protecting her from stress. But deep down, I knew what I was really protecting. My share of her love turned into numbers. She noticed, of course. She always did. "Did you cancel my appointment?" she asked over breakfast 2 days later. I nearly dropped the cup. "You weren't feeling up to it." Her eyes lingered on mine, unreadable. "You've started deciding things for me," she said quietly. I tried to laugh it off. Someone has to. She didn't reply, just looked out the window and said, "The magnolias are early this year." After that, something between us shifted. Gently, almost imperceptibly, like a door closing on its own. The days stretched longer, but her shadow grew smaller. She napped more, ate less, and spoke in half sentences that seemed to belong to dreams. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out at the garden for hours. Once I asked what she was thinking about. "Roots," she said. "How they keep things alive even when the flowers are gone." That night, I found her writing in a notebook. When I asked, she said it was just her thoughts. I didn't believe her. I wanted to ask if she was angry with me, but I couldn't. I didn't want to hear her say yes. So I kissed her forehead and said goodnight, pretending it wasn't a goodbye in slow motion. A week later, she fell in the kitchen. I heard the sound, porcelain breaking, her body hitting the floor. I ran, screaming her name. She was conscious, bleeding from a small cut on her forehead. I tried to call the ambulance. No, she said, gripping my wrist. No hospitals tonight. I carried her to the couch, cleaned the wound, and wrapped her in a blanket. She kept staring at me, not in pain, but in quiet study. You've been trying too hard, she whispered. You can't stop the end from coming. I can try, I said. She smiled faintly. That's what scares me. The next day, she insisted on calling Daniel herself. I panicked. I told her his number had changed, that he was traveling. It was another lie. By then, I'd lost count of them. She didn't argue. She just nodded and said, Then tell him I love him when you can. I promised, but I never did. That night, I dreamed of drowning, not in water, in guilt. I woke up before dawn, sat by her bedside, and watched her breathe. Her chest rose and fell like a secret rhythm. I imagined what the house would sound like without it. The first bird sang outside, too early, too alive. The sound felt offensive. She opened her eyes slowly, smiled. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said. Just dreaming. Then dream better, she whispered, and closed her eyes again. For the first time, I wondered if she already knew. Days later, a nurse called while I was out getting groceries. When I returned, I saw the missed call, the voicemail. I pressed play. Mrs. Parker's test results came back, the voice said. Her condition is worsening. We recommend immediate hospice care. I deleted it before she could hear, then sat at the kitchen table and cried without sound. It wasn't grief that broke me. It was the realization that I was no longer lying for her. I was lying for myself. That night, as she slept, I whispered into the dark. Just a few more weeks. Please, just a few. Because if she left too soon, the truth would too. And I wasn't ready for either. I used to think that lies came with thunder. But the truth is quieter. It slips in like fog, coats every corner of a house until you can't see what used to be clean. By the time autumn arrived, I could barely tell where my mother's silence ended and my deceit began. We existed in parallel routines. Tea at 7, pills at 9, short walks when the pain allowed it. From the outside, we looked peaceful. Inside, I was counting the minutes between one lie and the next. Every morning, I opened her curtains wide so the neighbors could see sunlight in her room. Light meant life. And I needed everyone, Daniel, the world, maybe even God, to believe she was fine. If nobody questioned the picture could keep existing. The phone rang less now. I made sure of it. When it did, I answered first. When letters came addressed to Mrs. Evelyn Parker, I opened them and folded bad news into the trash. Bills were paid automatically, appointments canceled quietly. I'd created a version of reality that obeyed me, a fragile empire built on omission. Mother still smiled at breakfast. Sometimes she hummed, a habit from before the diagnosis. She'd look out at the yard, eyes resting on the magnolia tree. That tree's older than you, she'd say. I know, I'd answer, pretending the moment wasn't slipping away. But each day her steps shortened, her breath thinned. When she forgot dates or dropped spoons, she'd laugh and say, age. I laughed too. I let her lie, because it made mine smaller. The doctor called again one afternoon. I stared at the phone vibrating across the table, watched his name flash like guilt in digital blue. Then I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, I blocked the number. The silence afterward was unbearable, so I filled it. I cleaned the house, rearranged cabinets, alphabetized her spices, as if order could disguise decay. I told myself it was love. Maybe in some twisted way it was. Weeks passed. The vineyard outside turned from green to rust. Mother asked about Daniel only once. "Has your brother called?" I stirred her soup and said, "He sent flowers." She nodded, eyes soft. He always was thoughtful. I wanted to scream. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the wind drag through the gutters. I imagined Daniel's life. His city apartment, his dinners, his effortless charm. He had freedom. I had obligation. And yet, she still divided everything equally. The resentment tasted metallic. Every time I brought her tea, I felt it on my tongue. One evening, I found her journal open on the desk. She was asleep on the couch, breathing shallowly. The handwriting was hers, neat, slanted, blue ink. September 17th. Claire worries too much. She thinks love means control. I should tell her that love is not a leash. I closed the notebook slowly, afraid it would speak again. The next morning, I hid it in a drawer. If truth could be misplaced, maybe consequences could too. I started monitoring her medications more carefully, not for her health, but for my control. I measured dosages, scheduled refills, spoke to pharmacists pretending to be her. It felt responsible. It felt necessary. And every necessary thing I did built another layer around me. The nurse noticed the change first. She was young, compassionate, the kind who still believed every patient could be saved. She asked why we'd missed appointments. I smiled. "We're taking a break," I said. She frowned. "The doctor needs updated results. I'll handle it." She hesitated, then handed me a pamphlet about hospice care. When she left, I tore it in half. That night, I added her number to the block list. I thought control would make me calm. Instead, it made me restless, pacing at night, counting her breaths like seconds of borrowed time. Sometimes, in the half-dark, I caught her watching me. She never asked outright what I was hiding. Maybe she didn't need to. Maybe she already knew. One morning, she said, "You should rest more." "I'm fine. You're getting thin." I shrugged. Then she added, "Guilt eats faster than grief." I froze. She smiled, but her eyes held something sharper than kindness. I changed the subject. Later that day, I overheard her on the phone with Martha, her oldest friend. "I'm fine," she was saying, cheerful. "Claire's taking good care of me. Maybe too good." A pause, then laughter. But the sound felt wrong, brittle, deliberate, as if she was performing comfort for my sake. That evening, she asked me to fetch a box from the attic. Her winter clothes, she said. I climbed the stairs, coughing through dust and nostalgia. When I opened the box, I found photo albums, not sweaters. Pictures of us, birthdays, picnics, Daniel's graduation. In the last photo, Mom stood between us, proud, radiant. I had my arm around her. Daniel was already stepping away. The caption in her handwriting read, "Both of my hearts." I sat on the floor and cried for the first time in months. It wasn't pretty crying. It was soundless, animal. When I wiped my face, I felt lighter and emptier all at once. Downstairs, she called softly, Did you find them? Yes, I said. I found memories. She laughed, gentle and far away. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her phrase, guilt eats faster than grief. So I wrote a new lie in my mind, one that sounded almost noble. I'm not lying for me. I'm lying to protect her peace. I repeated it like a prayer until it started to sound true. The following week, she collapsed in the garden. It was mid-afternoon, light, sharp as glass. I ran to her, knelt in the dirt. She was conscious, whispering, "Don't call the hospital." Her pulse fluttered beneath my fingers like a bird caught in a fist. I lifted her, half carried her inside. While I cleaned the soil from her hands, she watched me. "You're afraid of losing me," she said. I nodded. "Then promise you'll let me go when it's time." I said I would. It was my biggest lie yet. After that, she stopped asking about Daniel entirely. The silence between us thickened, but it was no longer hostile. It was observant. She watched me the way a painter studies light, not judging, just understanding. I began keeping her company through the nights, reading old novels aloud. Her eyelids would flutter. Sometimes she'd smile mid-sentence. It felt like peace. And yet, I knew it was only the eye of the storm. One morning, she surprised me. "I want to update my will," she said. My stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because things change." I tried to laugh. "You're not dying tomorrow." She gave me a look, tender, unblinking. "No, but I am dying." I stalled her for days, claiming the lawyer was unavailable. When he finally called, I answered and said she was hospitalized. He sounded concerned. I hung up before he could ask questions. That evening, she asked, "Did he call?" "No." Another lie. She sighed, not disappointed, just tired. "You remind me of your father," she said. I stiffened. "He meant well," she added, "but he always thought love was a transaction." I wanted to defend myself, but she closed her eyes. Conversation over. In the following weeks, her strength faded like a photograph left in sun. She slept longer, spoke less. Sometimes I thought she was already halfway gone, her spirit rehearsing departure. Then one night, I heard her voice through the door. Soft, fragile. "I forgive you," she whispered. I froze outside the frame, unsure whether she was dreaming or awake. I didn't ask. I couldn't. From that moment, every sound in the house became magnified. Clocks ticking, floorboards sighing, my own breath betraying me. I felt watched by her absence even while she was still alive. Guilt made me paranoid. When the mail arrived, I snatched it before the postman reached the porch. When neighbors waved, I smiled too brightly. When Daniel's name appeared on caller ID, I stared at it until the screen went black. He called again 2 days later. I finally answered. "Hey, Claire," he said, cheerful. "How's Mom?" "She's resting." "Good. I might visit next week." I felt my throat tighten. "She's traveling," I blurted. "Traveling?" "Up north. A retreat." He laughed. "She hates the cold. She's trying something new." He paused, sensing the fracture. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking. Later, I told her I'd spoken to him. She smiled faintly. "And what did you say?" "That you're happy." "Am I?" "You seem to be." "Then I must be." Her acceptance frightened me more than suspicion would have. Winter crept in early. The house smelled of dust and jasmine tea. I decorated for Christmas even though she'd asked for simplicity. When the lights flickered on, she said softly, "You've made it beautiful." I said, "For you." She whispered, "Or for what you're afraid to lose." That night, while she slept, I found the journal again. This time, I read deeper. December 4th. Claire loves me too much to be honest. I hope when I'm gone, she'll see that truth is kinder than protection. I closed the book and pressed it to my chest. The paper felt warm, almost alive. I realized she wasn't writing for herself. She was writing for me. Days later, she asked to go outside. We sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets, the world crisp with frost. She looked at the horizon, then at me. "When you were a child," she said, "you used to think sunsets were fire. You cried because you thought the sky was burning." I remember. I told you it was just light leaving slowly. Her eyes glistened. That's what I'm doing now. I broke. Tears, words, apologies, all useless. She took my hand. "Promise me one thing," she said. "When I'm gone, don't let guilt live where love used to." I promised again, knowing I couldn't keep it. That evening, I found a sealed envelope on her dresser, my name on it. I didn't open it. I wasn't brave enough. She fell asleep early, her breathing shallow, steady. I sat beside her all night, counting each inhale as proof I still had time. By dawn, I was whispering lies to the morning. "She's better," I told the empty room. "She's fine. She'll make it." But the house had stopped believing me. The morning she stopped waking early, the house changed temperature. It wasn't colder, it was emptier. Like the air itself was waiting for instructions. For weeks, I'd measured her days by sound. The kettle whistle, the shuffle of slippers, the slow hum that meant she was still here. That morning there was nothing. I stood outside her door, holding the breakfast tray, afraid of silence. When I finally entered, she was lying perfectly still, eyes open, watching the ceiling as though reading something written there. "You overslept," I said, pretending normalcy. "No," she whispered. "I just stopped pretending I'm not tired." That was the first time she admitted it, the ending. I told her we could fight, that medicine changed, that miracles still existed for the stubborn. She smiled like a teacher humoring a child. "I'm not afraid of leaving, Claire. I'm afraid of what you'll become when I do." I wanted to say I'll be fine, but the word fine had already decayed in my mouth. The nurse came that afternoon. She said Mother needed observation, oxygen, new medication. I nodded, took the forms, and filed them in the drawer labeled later. Later became never. Daniel called again that night. I didn't answer. He left a message. "I'll be there on Friday. Don't try to stop me." Friday. I spent the next 3 days constructing illusions. Fresh flowers, folded blankets, fake laughter. Mother watched quietly, saying nothing. On Thursday evening, she asked for her pearl earrings. "They're in the safe," I said. "I want to wear them tomorrow." I hesitated. He doesn't deserve the welcome. Her gaze cut through me. It isn't for him. It's for me. When she fell asleep, I stood beside the bed and stared at her face, pale, lined, luminous in the lamplight. It terrified me that love could look so still. Daniel arrived with the confidence of someone who believes he's forgiven simply for showing up. His car gleamed in the driveway. His shoes clicked on the marble floor. He looked at me with practiced warmth. "You look tired," he said. I wanted to tell him exhaustion was an inheritance he hadn't earned. Instead, I said, "She's resting." When he entered her room, the air shifted. I waited in the hall, listening to their voices, soft, strained, then laughter, faint but real. Something cracked in me. For months, I'd been her entire world. Now, in one afternoon, he reclaimed half of it just by existing. When he left the room, he looked lighter. "She wants to see the lawyer," he said. "She can't handle that right now." He frowned. "She asked me to call him." "I already did," I lied. "He's away." He didn't argue, but suspicion flickered. "Claire," he said quietly, "what have you done?" "I kept her alive." He shook his head. "No, you kept her hostage." The word hit like a blade slipped under skin. He left that night for a hotel in town, saying he'd be back in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I wandered the halls, the house groaning under its secrets. In her room, she stirred and said my name. "I told him," she whispered. "Told him what?" "That I'm dying, and that you're scared." I froze. "I didn't want him to hate you," she continued. "So I told him the truth, before you could rewrite it." Her honesty felt like betrayal wrapped in grace. I wanted to scream, to beg her to stay silent one more time. But she reached for my hand. "Don't fight what's already forgiving you," she said. The lawyer arrived the next afternoon. Daniel was already there, sitting beside her bed, holding her hand like a son in a photograph. I stood behind them, invisible. She dictated revisions in a voice softer than wind. Donations to charity, trust for hospital staff, equal division between her children. But when she mentioned a sealed letter to be opened after, I felt the air thin. The lawyer nodded, wrote, left quietly. Daniel stayed behind, speaking to her in murmurs I couldn't hear. When I entered, she looked at me with exhaustion that had no edge. "Sit," she said. "Please." I obeyed. "I've written everything down," she said. "When the time comes, don't search for fairness. Search for meaning. I don't understand. You will." She drifted into sleep mid-sentence. Daniel looked at me. "You should rest." "I can't." He sighed. "You're going to regret all this," I whispered. "I already do." That night I dreamed of water again. Clear, still, endless. I was drowning, but the voice beneath the surface sounded like hers. "Stop fighting. Float." When I woke, dawn painted the curtains gold. Her bed was empty. For a moment, I thought she'd died in her sleep. Then I heard footsteps from the garden. She was sitting on the bench, wrapped in a shawl, watching the sky bloom. "I wanted to see one more sunrise," she said. I knelt beside her. "You could have woken me." I did, in another life. We sat together in silence. The horizon burned gently, light spilling like forgiveness. After breakfast, she collapsed without sound. Her cup shattered, the pearls scattered across the floor. I called her name once, twice, then nothing. The paramedics arrived too late. Daniel signed the papers. I stood in the corner, hands clasped like a child in detention. When they wheeled her away, the house exhaled. The funeral was small, polite, cruelly fast. White lilies, a photograph from her 40th birthday. People I didn't know offered sympathy like samples in a store. Daniel spoke first, calm, grateful, the perfect son. When it was my turn, words hid from me. I said only, "She taught me that silence can heal or destroy." I'm still learning which one I chose. Afterward, Daniel hugged me. It was brief, but real. "We'll get through this," he said. I nodded, knowing we wouldn't. 2 weeks later, the lawyer called. "The will is ready to be read," he said. "Both of you must attend." I dressed in black again, though the world had already moved on to color. Daniel arrived with calm anticipation. I arrived with dread disguised as poise. The lawyer's office smelled of paper and cologne. He opened the folder, cleared his throat, began to read. Most of it matched the draft. Donations, trusts, polite instructions for legacy. Then he paused. "However," he said, "there is an addendum." He looked at Daniel. "To my son, Daniel, I leave the estate, the vineyard, and the majority of my holdings. You will know what to do with them." Then his gaze shifted to me. "To my daughter, Claire, I leave a sealed envelope and a key." The room tilted. Daniel looked shocked. The lawyer looked sorry. I felt nothing, just the slow spread of cold under my skin. The lawyer handed me a small white envelope, embossed with my mother's handwriting. I couldn't read it there. I couldn't breathe there. I left without a word. Outside, rain began to fall. Fine, deliberate, like punctuation. Back home, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. It stared back at me, patient as guilt. When I finally opened it, her voice filled the room, written in blue ink. "My darling Claire, you tried to protect me from death by pretending it wasn't coming, but death never needed your permission. What you could have protected was your own peace, not my body. I forgive you for everything you hid. You wanted to control love because you were afraid to lose it. I'm leaving you a key, not to wealth, but to understanding. Go to the lake house. There you'll find what I could never tell you out loud." The key was small, brass, familiar. I knew instantly where it belonged. I drove through the rain without planning, headlights carving silence through fog. The lake house waited, untouched since childhood. White shutters, ivy, ghosts. When I unlocked the door, the air smelled of dust and salt. On the table sat a leather-bound journal and a photo frame. In the picture, she was young, holding me at the shore. Behind it, a note, read slowly. I opened the journal. The first entry was dated 3 months before she died. "If love is a mirror, I've watched my daughter fog it with fear." Another page. "She believes loyalty must hurt to be real." And another. "I hope when she reads this, she'll see that truth doesn't punish. It releases." Halfway through, a pressed magnolia flower fell out. Under it, one line written trembling, but clear. "When she finally sits by the lake, she will see that I never left." I couldn't finish reading. The words blurred with tears I hadn't earned. I stayed until dusk, sitting on the porch, watching the lake reflect the dying light. For the first time in years, I didn't lie. Not to her, not to myself. I whispered into the water, "I'm sorry." The wind carried it somewhere she might still hear. The lake never stopped moving that night. It breathed, sighed, shimmered, like it was alive with everything I couldn't say. I sat on the porch until dawn, her journal on my lap, the key warm in my hand. When the first light touched the water, I finally understood what she meant. This wasn't punishment. It was mercy. Mercy that arrived too late to be comfortable, but just in time to matter. I'd spent so long trying to control her ending that I'd erased the grace in it, and now she was gone, leaving me with silence loud enough to drown in. Inside, the house felt smaller than memory. The furniture was still wrapped in dust sheets. The air smelled like cedar and salt. On the kitchen counter, I found a sealed envelope addressed to my children, Daniel's name written beside mine. I hesitated, then I called him. He answered after 3 rings. Claire. His voice was flat, cautious. I found something, I said, at the lake house. A pause. I'll drive up. It took him 4 hours. I spent those hours replaying our childhood, trying to find the last time we'd been kind to each other, without conditions. I couldn't. When he arrived, he didn't look angry, just older. He stood by the doorway, eyes scanning the place. I haven't been here in 20 years, he said. I handed him the envelope. Maybe you should open it. No, I said quietly. We both should. We sat at the old dining table, the same table where she'd once taught us how to write our names. He broke the seal carefully, as if the paper might bite. Inside was a letter written in her graceful handwriting. My dearest children, if you are reading this, I am already at peace. I know your hearts are heavy, but they are still beating. That means you have time to change. Daniel, you ran because you feared becoming your father. You thought distance could protect you from disappointment. It didn't. Love will always find you, if you let it. Claire, you stayed because you feared being forgotten. But love that must be earned by control will always rot into guilt. I divided my legacy not by fairness, but by need. Daniel needs structure. He will build something that outlives him. You need freedom. You must learn what it means to live without owning anyone, not even me. The lake is yours, Claire. It is where truth rests. Daniel, the estate is yours, because it never mattered to you. Maybe that's why you can handle it wisely. Forgive each other, if not for me, then for the years you still have left. The last line trembled slightly. And remember, love isn't divided by inheritance. It's multiplied by forgiveness. When he finished reading, Daniel looked at me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said softly, "She knew us better than we ever tried to know her." I nodded, throat tight. She always did. We sat there for an hour in shared silence, the kind that no longer hurt. When he finally left, I stayed behind, tracing her handwriting with my finger until the ink smudged. The following weeks passed in quiet fragments. People called to offer condolences. I let the phone ring. The lawyer sent papers for me to sign, formalities about the lake property. I signed them without reading. At night, I read the journal over and over, each entry peeling away another layer of justification I'd built around myself. January 6th. I think she's lying again, but I love her too much to correct her. February 3rd. Daniel will return one day. I hope she lets him in before it's too late. March 11th. If love is a mirror, maybe I should stop asking her to look. She can't stand her own reflection yet. Every page was a forgiveness I didn't deserve. One afternoon, the lawyer called again. "There's one more item," he said. "Your mother left a foundation trust under your name." My chest tightened. I thought she left everything to Daniel. Financially, yes. But this is different. It's a charity fund. She named it the Evelyn Trust, You're the trustee. I laughed, sharp, brittle. I don't know how to run a charity. She thought you'd learn. After the call, I sat in silence. The irony was perfect. She'd taken the one thing I'd wanted, control, and turned it into responsibility. Love, once again, disguised as work. A month after the funeral, Daniel invited me to dinner in the city. I almost said no, but guilt wears patience down. He chose an expensive restaurant, the kind with glass walls and piano music, too polite to feel. When I arrived, he stood to greet me. You look better, he said. I sleep less. That's honesty, progress. We ordered quietly. The waiter hovered, vanished. He leaned forward. I read the journal. My stomach knotted. You went to the lake? I had to know her version. And he smiled faintly. It wasn't about versions. It was about lessons. She wasn't trying to make us saints. She was trying to make us see each other. I exhaled. Did it work? Maybe. He studied me. You've changed. So have you. Yeah, he said. Grief does that. We finished dinner in near silence. When the bill came, he reached for it, but I stopped him. Let me, I said. He frowned. Mom would laugh at that. Maybe she's watching, I said. Let her laugh. When we parted outside, he hugged me. Awkward, brief, real. Come visit sometime, he said. The vineyard's alive again. I smiled. So are we. Back at the lake house, I began restoring the place, repainting walls, fixing shutters, planting magnolias. It wasn't penance, it was participation. Every nail I hammered felt like a confession accepted. Sometimes I imagined her watching, not as a ghost, but as warmth in the air, a thought that didn't hurt anymore. I found another note hidden behind a loose floorboard, folded small, paper thin as breath. If you're reading this, it means you've started listening instead of controlling. That's how you'll find peace. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Spring arrived quietly. The water thawed. The magnolias bloomed in white clusters, their petals like forgiveness you could touch. I began hosting small gatherings for the foundation. Widows, single mothers, women who had nothing but endurance. I told them about my mother. Not her illness, not the inheritance, just her kindness, her precision with love. Every story I told about her felt like untying a knot. One woman said, "You speak about her like she's still here." I smiled. Maybe she is. When I returned to the city for errands, I visited her grave for the first time. It was smaller than I expected. Modest stone, her name carved cleanly. Someone had left a magnolia blossom on top. I knew it was Daniel. I placed my hand on the stone. I rid everything, I whispered. And I'm trying. The wind moved softly, as if answering. Weeks later, a letter arrived from Daniel. No greeting, no sign-off, just a single paragraph. Mom was right. We both built our lives around fear. You feared losing love. I feared earning it. I'm selling half the estate and putting it into the trust. Consider it her final equal share. I cried. Not because of the money, but because it meant we'd finally learned the same language. That night, I walked down to the lake. The moon was bright, the water silver. I stood barefoot at the edge, the cold biting and clean. For the first time, I said her name aloud, without pain. Evelyn. The echo came back softer. Live. Months turned into a year. The foundation grew quietly, like her garden once had. I received letters from women who'd been helped by it. Stories of survival, small victories, new beginnings. Every envelope felt like her handwriting. One evening, as the sun folded into the horizon, I reread the first letter she'd left me. The ink had faded, but one line glowed in memory. Truth doesn't punish. It releases. I realized I'd been free for months without noticing. Freedom doesn't announce itself. It just arrives when you stop hiding. The guilt hadn't vanished. It had transformed into empathy, into discipline, into something resembling peace. I still missed her, but missing her no longer felt like a wound. It felt like light, leaving slowly. That night, Daniel called. "Hey," he said, "are you at the lake?" "Always. I was thinking we should rename the vineyard." "To what?" He hesitated. "Magnolia and Grace." I smiled into the phone. "She'd like that." "She would," he said. "Good night, Claire." "Good night." After the call, I stood by the window, watching moonlight stretch across the water. For the first time, I didn't see reflection or regret, just continuity. I whispered into the night, "I forgive you too, Mom." The lake shimmered as if it understood. A year after my mother's death, the lake no longer felt like a wound. It had become something else, a mirror I could finally look into without flinching. Every morning, I brewed tea the way she did. Jasmine, 2 spoons of honey. It wasn't ritual. It was memory disguised as routine. The house had grown quieter, but not empty. Silence can be cruel, yes, but it can also be kind. The Evelyn Trust was thriving. We'd funded community programs across 3 towns, supported women who'd lost homes, jobs, or simply direction. People called me Miss Parker with respect now, but I never quite got used to it. Respect feels lighter when you've earned it through pain. Sometimes journalists came to interview me. They'd ask about the charity, the inspiration, the story behind the name. I'd tell them, it started with a promise to my mother. I never told them what the promise was, that it began as a lie. One afternoon, I was sorting through donations in the foundation office when I found a letter addressed to the Evelyn Trust, director. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but something about the curve of the letters made my pulse quicken. Inside was a simple note. "Dear Ms. Parker, you don't know me, but your foundation saved my mother's life. She was sick, alone, and ready to give up. Your team found her, helped her, and now she's home again. She told me to tell you that she prays for you every night. Whatever loss you carry, please know it created hope for others. Thank you." I sat there for a long time, staring at the paper, realizing the circle had closed. A daughter had saved a mother, somewhere out there in reverse. The world had found its quiet symmetry. That evening, I drove back to the lake house. The magnolias were in bloom again, white petals scattered across the porch like gentle snow. The air smelled of damp wood and nostalgia. Inside, everything was as I'd left it. Organized, peaceful, patient. I walked to her old room, opened the window, and let the wind move through. It felt like breath. On her dresser sat the same photograph. Me, her, Daniel. For the first time, I noticed something I'd never seen before. The way her hand rested not on us, but between us. A bridge. Even in pictures, she'd been teaching us balance. I smiled through tears that didn't hurt anymore. Grief had lost its sharpness. It had become something softer, like sea glass polished by time. Later that night, I went down to the dock. The lake shimmered under a silver sky, still as memory. I brought her journal with me, worn, familiar, almost sacred. I opened to the last blank page and wrote, "You were right, Mom. Control was never love. It was fear with manners. But I'm learning. Every day, I'm learning how to let love breathe." I tore the page out, folded it, and placed it in the water. The paper floated for a moment, then slowly sank, as if the lake had been waiting to swallow this confession all along. A soft wind rose, carrying the scent of jasmine. For a second, I could almost hear her voice again. Not words, just the rhythm of her calm. I closed my eyes and remembered her final smile, the one that had terrified me then, but comforted me now. That smile had never been about death. It had been about acceptance. I whispered, "I understand now." The moonlight hit the surface of the lake, creating a perfect reflection, and in that reflection, for one impossible heartbeat, I saw her, standing on the opposite shore, looking back at me. Not young, not old, just eternal. She raised her hand, I raised mine. Then the light shifted, and she was gone, but the peace stayed. The next morning, Daniel arrived unexpectedly. He looked healthier, lighter, maybe even happy. He stood by the porch steps, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. "I live here now," I answered. "I know," he smiled. "Mom would approve." We sat side by side on the porch, watching the lake breathe. He handed me 1 cup. I renamed the vineyard officially. To what? Magnolia and Grace. We're opening next month. Profits go to the trust. I turned to him. "You mean our trust?" He nodded. Ours. We didn't need to say more. Sometimes peace isn't a conversation. It's a shared silence that no longer hurts. Weeks later, the press came to cover the vineyard's reopening. Reporters asked about legacy, family, forgiveness. Daniel answered gracefully, giving credit where I'd never thought he would. "She taught us both," he said, looking toward me, in very different ways. Cameras flashed. I smiled faintly, imagining her somewhere laughing at the irony. That night after the event, I returned to the lake alone again. The sky was dark velvet, the stars sharp as pins. I brought 1 bottle of wine, the first from our new vineyard. I poured a glass, lifted it toward the water. "To the woman who never stopped teaching," I said. The wind rippled across the lake, scattering reflections like applause. Months passed quietly. The foundation grew. The vineyard thrived. Daniel and I spoke more often, sometimes about work, sometimes about memories, sometimes about nothing at all. There was no competition now, no scoreboard of love. One afternoon, I received an invitation from a local university. They wanted me to speak at a seminar about the psychology of forgiveness. At first, I almost refused. Then I remembered something she'd written. When you stop hiding from truth, you become its voice. So I went. The auditorium was full of strangers, but I felt her calm beside me. I began my speech the same way she began every difficult conversation, with honesty. "My name is Claire Parker," I said, "and I built a charity from a lie." A soft murmur rippled through the audience. "I lied to protect my mother from pain. But in doing so, I only multiplied it. What I learned, painfully, beautifully, is that love without truth is just fear wearing perfume. The room went silent. For a moment, I thought I saw her in the crowd. Not as a ghost, but as a reflection in every kind face listening. Afterward, people came to thank me. One woman said, "Your story made me call my mother again." That was enough. Years later, when Daniel and I finally sold the vineyard, we stood by the gate together, watching the last truck leave. He said, "You know, she'd be proud of us." "She already was," I said. We donated half the proceeds to the trust, half to a hospital wing named the Evelyn Center for Palliative Care. The inscription on the plaque read, "For those who love enough to let go." I didn't write that line. He did. Now, every evening, I still walk down to the lake. I sit on the same bench she once loved. The magnolias bloom, the water glows gold at sunset, and the silence feels like company, not punishment. I bring her tea, jasmine, 2 spoons of honey, and place it on the railing beside me. It cools slowly in the breeze. Some nights, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear her say, "See, Claire? You finally learned how to love without lying." I smile. "Yes, Mom. I finally did." The reflection of the sky dances on the lake. Soft, endless, forgiving. And for the first time, I understand what peace really sounds like. It's the quiet between one truth ending and another beginning.